But once again, congratulations for your
Thank you.
project, the Wolf Forge. Such a great project. Our jurors were genuinely very impressed. So
Thank you.
yeah, so I'd like to start off with asking about the initial state of the site, that later transformed into the old forge. What was it like?
The initial challenge, it is like the story of the old forge is nestled in a picturesque, really beautiful green surrounding in a really beautiful area in an old village, and the old village was indeed under preservation order within the green belt. But the building itself, it is a former industrial building. It's a forge, a former forge. So what we needed to do is the client, when approached us, he saw the potential of the building to be transformed into something else. And that's what we addressed.
So, you've given me a glimpse about what the site was like. It was an industrial build and it had its own share of reservations about the materials that it had previously. So what was the concept and your initial ideas about the project? How did you like look forward with it?
The client approached us and requested to convert the old forge into a two-bedroom contemporary house. Now, how do we marry these two sort of buildings? It was a bit of a challenge in the beginning, but what we agreed with the client is that we're going to bring the old forge elements and the history of the building, converting that into a two-bedroom modern house with all the mod cons, with underfloor fitting and USB cable and contemporary heating and cooling and etc. So the concept was bringing the elements of the forging. So any element which was metal in the house was supposed to feel very grandiose and large and dark and expressed in the space in the room.
Okay. But apart from that, the initial concept that you guys had, obviously you're supposed to go ahead with a project that seems that would also attract or satisfy the client as well. But at the same time, how did the design look like once you guys started working?
It was really interesting because as we were addressing the beginning, it was the footprint of the building. The footprint was slightly L-shaped
Okay.
footprint, and we needed to obtain first a planning application, planning approval for the conversion of the old forge as an industrial building into a residential building. The second planning application we had to go through is to convert that and to extend the full extension of the back to allow for larger space. So increasing it from 100 square meters to 112 square meters is not a lot. But the planning procedure was actually very long. We needed to obtain a lot of surveys. Among other things, was actually a bat survey, because bats in the UK are under conservation, under preservation orders. So we needed to make sure, because it is a dilapidated building, to make sure that there are no bats affected. We didn't find any bats. No bats were affected in the making of the project.
What were the phases, of the construction? Not exactly construction, but phases all around the project.
The
From the
project.
initial process to
So
the
we
tender.
had the project was in several, as you say, in several phases. The first one was the first planning application to obtain for the conversion. Then the second was once we completed that stage, which was very rough construction of a two-bedroom house, but still in the L-shaped layout footprint. Then we completed another planning approval we obtained in order to get a full house extension to the back of the house, which is as you see it now. Then we went out to a tender process in the UK. It's a standard procedure where we obtain different variety of quotes, fee proposals from different construction companies, and the successful one, unfortunately, we entered into the pandemic, and that caused severe delays. Halfway through the pandemic, we had to change construction company because there were severe shortage supplies, materials, and we completed the project exactly a year ago.
Okay, but you told about the pandemic coming amidst the planning and the tender scenario, right? So did pandemic change certain things about the project as well, or you
Of
guys were
course,
intact about the initial idea and you just went ahead with it?
of course, because when we were designing, in the process of design and specification of the process, there were items that we were thinking that we can obtain. And that was half a year before the pandemic happened. So once we were already on a construction site, there were shortage, there were no supply of the tiles, there were long lead times of the glazing and the windows. The windows were supposed to be very unique to follow the original industrial windows. Lots of the elements of the house, they refer back to the old forge traditional historic elements. So we have the fireplaces, the trusses, the windows, the main entrance door, the external glazing to the rear. All these elements, they need to refer back to the original industrial feel of the building. And some of the elements we had to change suppliers because of lead times in the.
But were there also some other challenges involved in restoring the site? Obviously acquiring the material is one, right?
Well,
But some other
two
challenges.
major two major challenges we faced. One was we had original furnaces in the old forge, and they were connected in an arch into one single fireplace chimney, going into two furnaces into the arch, going into the chimney. And the furnaces were so large, they were conceived for industrial use, but when we needed to make that and convert that into residential use, it was in a completely different sizes, completely 21st century. We need to comply with building control, ventilation, health and safety. It was a huge challenge to overcome. Luckily, all the consultants and the construction company, together with building control, we have all worked together. Everyone just loved the design and the concept behind it and just worked together in order to achieve that. The second challenge was the trusses, because the roof needs to achieve exactly the same height, but the building inside, throughout the years, over 150 years, it has moved and evolved. And the trusses were supposed to support the same line of the roof, but at different locations. So what we designed is two different types of trusses. The central type is higher to give you this feeling of a raised feeling of the main roof, and the external other type of trusses, type B trusses, they were actually deeper for a human being to go inside. At the second floor, we designed a study. So one can go up the stairs and into the study.
Right, that is great. That was very insightful about the project. But Kathy, I'd also like to ask. This is not about this project, but I'd like to ask the design philosophy that your studio has. Or the design philosophy that is reflected in your studio obviously comes through you, right? So, and also, did this project had a reflection of it, or was it, or each of your project is just the demography or geography related?
Each project is reviewed on its own right and its own location, merit, and client and budget. This project specifically was one of the smallest projects we have in house. Each project, one thing which is common for all projects is we delve into a very intense, dynamic conversation, discussion with the clients back and forth to establish everything that they wish to achieve, the budget that they wish to achieve. That was the one overall arching strategy. The other thing is that when we look at projects, we look at them in layers. So every time we receive information from a consultant or a survey or a client new release of information or request, we overlay that information on top of the previous layers. And this way, the project builds this information and gives its own view. So we come and resolve that. There is no overarching overlapping to all our projects. The strategy is the same strategy, but it changes because the project is in different locations. We had projects in France, we had projects in Bulgaria, we had projects in the UK, more recently in Spain. The strategy is the same, the outcome is different because of the location, the clients, and the desire of the project.
Exactly. I mean, do you also think that there is one term called architectural style, right? So is that term overrated? Because I've heard a lot of, let's say, I've seen designs from Japan. Okay, it's a Tadao Ando made style. Okay, the site is made by Tadao Ando. Okay, so that is one thing I've seen, that designers are quite reluctant on letting go of their own style that they develop with time. So how important do you think, or how crucial it is for designers and architects to also shred that thing somewhat and just be open to new ideas and just design products which are geography specific?
I think it's really, really important to look at the geography because geography dictates climate, dictates use, dictates how the building is going to be used. Working in London, it dictates a lot of buildings are, oftentimes, we work with listed buildings, conservation areas, and the design as an architect, actually what we do is coming up with creative solutions to work in an existing environment where it is hugely restrictive. We need to meet a lot of building regulations and requirements, meet budgetary requirements. This is where the creativity of the architect comes in. It is not necessarily creative in the shape and the forms that we put out there, but it is actually creative in how we resolve the building in order to meet its function.
We've talked about functionality and the design a bit, right? But I'd also like to get a glimpse of how this project stands true to the environmental standards as well.
Into the standards you meant.
Yeah, environmental standards.
Environmental standards, of course. In this project specifically, architecture, design, and environmental sustainability was interwoven. Oftentimes, as an architect, you design something and then you pass through the filter of, is it sustainable? Can we pass, and how do we make it sustainable? This project was so well embedded in its own environment that sustainability was woven into its fabric, and we did not need to stop and think it. The bricks that were removed from openings where we created new openings were retained and reclaimed and reused to create new walls. The old roof tiles were retained and used in the gabions, which created the terraces of the landscape. There were a lot of items that were reclaimed, reused materials. The other thing that we used is air source heat pump. That is using the heat from the air is generated in led through pipes under the floor heating, and the heating is generating a very nice environment inside the house, not requiring any further fossil fuel or further electricity to be used. The ventilation is fantastic. The building is south orientated with huge glass facade to the south with openable skylights that generated very nice convection. The client has moved now a whole year, and they are coming back with a fantastic feedback that throughout the summer, the houses and the winter, respective seasons, they don't need additional heating or cooling in order to feel comfortable in the house. Something really interesting that we actually did as well was introducing bee bricks embedded into the wall of the old forge to allow the natural flow of bees, and if they needed somewhere to start a home. We used as well a water feature and into the landscape, which is allowing for bees and bugs to come and nest. There is a small garden, but we have rejuvenated the soil by turning it upside down, and that generates a really healthy environment for new plants to come and grow. the whole house was just designed with all these aspects. It constantly to be sustainable, and if the house is maintained well, it can surpass the average life cycle of a building of 60 or 100 years. It could maintain, if well maintained, can continue further.
The aging factor of the project, right? I
The
mean,
aging
how?
factor. We knew that when we were starting with the building, we're working with the original building, original structure, which was 150 years old. So knowing that there was a lot of support, it didn't have foundations. So we needed to dig new foundations. We needed
Yeah.
to support the existing building and build an internal insulation also to meet the 21st century requirements for building control insulation. So there were a lot of elements that were maintained. Also, because it was an industrial building, the windows we wanted to maintain and keep with the same proportion of the original industrial building, original industrial windows. So there were constant references to the old building, but passing it through the 21st century requirements, making it double glazed and airtight and
Yeah.
environmentally sustainable and making it a viable option for the 21st century. It is a two-bedroom house with two ensuite bathrooms, with a modern kitchen, modern heating, but it just looks as a as an 18th century old forge.
Correct. So you also had any kind of challenges while working in collaboration with the contractors and the consultants?
The challenges were not within the team. The team was very united and we worked. Everyone understood very well from the onset what we were trying to achieve. The challenges came from external parameters, as I mentioned, the making sure that there is no bat nest within the building and making sure that we have the supply chain is working to deliver the materials that we needed to have on time on board. Making sure the fireplaces were a huge challenge. It took us 3-4 months of everyone working simultaneously, including main contractor, project manager, design, energy consultant, myself, the fireplace supplier. We all work together, making sure that it's actually fit for the purpose of heating and working as it should be in the 21st century modern contemporary home.
Exactly. So, when you had gone to the site, there were some ideas that you developed about it, but were there some specific tools or, pieces of research that you used in the project?
As when we start working on every project, we always delve into the history of the building. That's part of the natural research and what is how did the building perform, how did it perform as part of the local community, if there are other forges in the vicinity that we can refer to, if there are any. Interestingly, there were some other buildings that could understand and see how it worked and how forging the whole process worked. There were a lot of references that we actually collected in a big sort of board and we stuck it together and looked at different things before we actually came up with the plan and with the design. And then that board of the references was transferred to the board of the mood board, as it were,
Right.
how it's
Yeah.
going to be translated into actual design elements. And the moment this was brought to the client as well, and once he understood as well where the research comes from and how it is translated into design element, it was a direct transition and the client was immediately on board. For one instance, the trusses usually in that area, trusses are done in wood, heavy wooden beams. And the client was expecting them to be again heavy wooden beams. But because it was the old forge and the forging element, and we wanted to accentuate that forging element to bring that back again, we actually designed very refined, very slim, thin trusses with the bolts accentuated to actually show the forging element again. And the
For
moment we brought that translation,
instance
the
is one
client,
fact. We talk about the width that people talk about, or the client would be expecting, was it would have been heavy as per their what they expected it to be, but you guys redesigned it. So did you test the strength or the other parameters?
of course, we had consultants on board, we had structural engineer on board, we had the company that produces the trusses. They they make their own, they have their own softwares, they run the calculations, and we have to trust them that it works. And it looks absolutely fantastic now in the space. We're really happy with the outcome and the delivery, and everyone was on board. Also, design the trusses with the two different types of trusses is not a regular sort of design.
Yeah.
And when we brought that forward to the client and to the design team, at the beginning there were a lot of queries and trying to understand why would you want to have two different types. But now everyone understood the difference is that the type A is going to be lifted in the air, whereas type B is actually brought down in order for a human to go up the stairs through the truss. And the moment it's actually now on site, everyone just looks at it. Yes, of course, it has to be this way. It looks completely natural in the space.
Okay, but along the similar lines, we've talked about how important or how tough it gets for architects or designers to explain certain things to clients,
Mhm.
certain out of the box things to clients. So, how important, Kathy, do you consider the art of persuasion for designers and architects?
I call it communication. It's not a persuasion, it's really communication. We have open channels with clients. It means that it could be using Instagram, using WhatsApp, snapping a picture when they go somewhere, when they see something and they say, oh, can we do it like this? Can we do it like that? The communication is straightforward at eye level. We don't, it's a lot of explanation at the beginning of the project to take actually the clients. Most of our clients come not from the industry, so they don't know exactly what the procedure is like and what to expect. So at the beginning, we take a lot of time to actually explain what to expect in what are the phases, who is involved, when this person or consultant come into place, and when they come out of the picture, and what are they supposed to deliver for the project. Also, we send questionnaires to the clients to really to delve into their wants, wishes, requirements, must have. So that we have that questionnaire and we expect that to be filled before we start the project. So there is a lot of information and a lot of, that's why I call it dynamic communication. It's getting, requesting the information from the client, absorbing that, and then translating that into the design. So later on, lots of times clients come back and say, oh, it feels so natural to be in this house. It's exactly what we wanted. It's because of this process of assimilation of information and translating that into design items and ideas.
Exactly. You won't need to persuade a client if you're having a clear cut direct communication with them, right?
Exactly. There is no
Yeah.
need to
So, Kathy,
persuade
along this,
anyone. It was just a clear line of communication.
exactly. So, what is your idea of rethinking the future in the realm of architecture and design?
I do love that line of work that we are constantly involved in taking old buildings and rethinking their future use. So we're looking at, we have converted a former party house in party as political party house into a bespoke hotel in the heart of Bulgaria. We have converted the old forge into a residential house. We have converted another residential building into multi-users and pop-up art installation in the heart of London. At the moment, we're looking to translate, to transfer and transform an old hotel into bespoke residential community. I cannot share any more further details, but this sort of thinking is constant and prevailing in our line of work. Taking all the buildings, because we have so many in London, the majority of the buildings in London are actually old existing environment, and actually rethinking their functionality to meet the 21st century needs and the changing needs also. Because today that client uses the building in this form, but in 10, 20, 30 years, the building will change hands into someone new, and that needs to meet future needs in terms of energy use, access, amount of people accessing the building as well.
Exactly. All right, that was a really great and very insightful conversation with you, Kathy. It was great to have you with us.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate taking time.
Also look forward to having the other projects from Studio near future with RTF, and let's keep doing this.
Yes, yes, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kathy, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.